me, the chapel was the most beautiful building in the institution. It had big, beautiful murals. I couldn't give you the measurement of the building off the top of my head. It was a fairly large building. It was the first building built in the institution, and even though it was as large as it was, there was only 3 murals on each side. They were so large, and they were beautiful murals of our Lord Jesus crying over Jerusalem, one on the cross. Can't remember right off what the others were, but they were really nice murals. They had some wonderful guests in, some wonderful speakers, and lots of the fellows were very dedicated and very serious about the chapel service. Of course, there was others who went there just because the guests and the good-looking young ladies that came in and so on, which is natural. No one even downgraded them because they weren't being phony. They said that's what they come for, was to see the good-looking ladies, and they were very honest about it. We find the riot that moved into the new site after I was released took place in the mess hall and in the chapel, and totally burnt both to the ground. And as I have been back to the institution since, I was just about heartsick to see that them 2 buildings, which were nice buildings, was completely gutted and flat, for near just the wall standing.
You stood down at the bottom of this walkway here, on your way up in between the buildings here. You stood at the bottom of this step here, stretched out. This doesn't show 5 houses, but 5 houses back in here. And you was stretched out in line. Now, as long as you was at the bottom of those steps, you could talk to the guy behind you, in front of you, across from you. There was 2 lines. The minute you started up them steps, when they blew that whistle and chow was being served, you didn't say any more. And from that time until you walked out of that chow hall, you didn't say anything at all. It was a silent system. You grabbed your utensils and your tray and your cup and you went up the line, and if you didn't want it or you didn't want very much, you said so, because if you took it, you ate it. And if you didn't eat it, after you took it, you went to 5 house. It was just automatic. Don't eat your food, go to 5 house. There was an officer standing at the door, which was usually the captain of the yard, and up on the left-hand side of the dining hall, facing the back of the kitchen, was a little room. And in that little room was an officer with a shotgun and a box of shells, and he was there for every meal. And if he caused any problems in there, the captain stood at the back, at the front door. All he had to do was just step out, and that was the end of it right there. They'd shoot you.
We've had many attempts. One that I really delighted in was one that Dillard was thrown in the hole. And Dillard was in there for about 3 years. Not all at once, but totally 3 years. But this particular time, he was in there for a little over 18 months and was digging his way out with a spoon and a homemade digger. And he had it measured off and was just what he thought was outside the wall. And he had a little cave-in as the drag truck, which went around once a week over the deadline, kind of sunk right there where his tunnel was, and was brought to Mr. Carey's attention. So Mr. Carey very politely didn't get excited, didn't let Dillard know anything. He just went back out front, got him a chair, come back over and sat down and listened to old Dillard dig. And when Dillard come up, he was on the inside of the wall yet. He'd missed it by about 6 feet. Mr. Carey was sitting there with a shotgun across his lap, asked Dillard, well, how's things going? And I won't repeat what Dillard said, but he was taken back down and put in a different cell, and they just poured concrete in the hole that he had dug.
If you didn't go peaceably, they just put 2 handcuffs on you with a 8-foot chain and drug you. They didn't ask you to walk, they drug you. And it didn't make any difference whether it was on the asphalt or on the sidewalks or down the steps or up the steps. They drug you until they got you where they was going to take you. And if you couldn't get up, it was Siberia. They took all your clothes away, threw you in a room. It was 5 hours, took you upstairs and locked you up.
Well, the lighting was very poor. We had probably 60-watt bulbs out in the hallway and none in the cell. The only light you got in the cell was through a ventilator in the roof. The first time I was over there, they had metal bunks attached to the walls. It was about 18 inches wide by 6 feet long. And they give you 2 blankets and a bucket for drinking water. The walls, in the summertime, the walls would sweat. In the wintertime, there's ice on them. You had enough trouble just staying warm in the wintertime. You couldn't make no way you could stay cool in the summertime. We flooded the cells and everything else. The only thing to give you to pass the time would be the Bible. And we took the Bible and made chessboards in it, took toilet paper, used their bread and mixed up dough and made chess sets, dominoes, cards. Every week when they come over to shower, if they give us 1 shower a week, they'd take everything away from us, and we'd have to start all over and build it back.
Siberia. Well, when I come out of there, I'll tell you, I had a different attitude and a different outlook in life. I really got where I didn't care. You know? I just soon killed the cop as looked at. You know, it just done something to me. You know, my mind, I was very bitter. And from that day on, I don't know, I just didn't seem to, I just didn't seem to be the same, you know. I had a different outlook. I just thought everything was shitty. And that's the way you gotta be. You know, if that's the way you gotta be, why not be that way? So I do things I didn't really care, you know. It changes the person. There's some people come out of there that were worse off than me. I mean, they really effectively get it. They come out of there, they went in there and they were pretty model. They're model prisoners, you know. When they get a little trouble, they get in there and they come out and boy, they turn wild and every other thing. You know? It just does it to you. That's what it does. That's the results when you go into Siberia as a whole. And then you turn bitter on the personnel, on the guard, you know. I mean, it just turns you against everything, the whole world. So you just don't give a darn anymore. That's how it affected me anyway. Of course, I've been through so many things, you know, that to me anymore, I don't care. But you can imagine the effect it would have on a young guy today, especially here, get so many of these youngsters.
I've seen a lot of people. I don't know. I thought it was kind of funny at the time because a lot of people couldn't make it. Seen people commit suicide, seen them bug out. Some of them were sent. Little Tommy, he went to the back to our kingdom, I guess, locked up. Randy Woods, he just hung himself off the ledge of the door. Some of them cut their arm trying to get to the hospital and squirt blood all over. It's a place for survivors, and that's all. If you didn't have the will to survive, you were in bad trouble. Like everything else, you make a game out of it. You try to win. Usually in the summertime, we'd try to get in the hole. In the wintertime, we'd try to get in Siberia. Siberia was small cells, the hole was a big one. In the summertime, you'd rather be over in a hole where there's more circulation of air and you can put on an exercise routine. It was better in the summertime. And in the wintertime, you freeze to death so hard. It's hard to make it. It was good.
If you had medical problems, I had a tooth one time that they had the outside dentists come in that was getting ready to take their exams and they'd fix your teeth. And they came in one day and fixed my tooth. The next day happened to be the day that the regular dentist was going to be there on Thursday. And I went up to him and it was aching where they filled it. And at that time they sat you in the chair, he asked you which one and you pointed it out. He got a syringe, put it full of Novocaine, shot the tooth, sent you around to the end of the line. And when your turn came up the line again, you sat back down in the chair and they pulled the tooth. They didn't make, they had a couple of boys that used to be dentists out on the street. And their hustle was that they'd make you a set of false teeth.
I had one fellow work for me at the kitchen, and he was down in where they took their showers. And there was 4 inmates attacked him. And they were going to go for a sex deal with the guy, and he knocked them all out. He just flattened. And a couple of guards came down there, and he flattened them too. And so they were going to take him to 5 House and lock him up. And I said no. I said, if you lock up this inmate, then you lock me up too. Because he's not wrong. Whatever he did down there was right. And they didn't lock him up either. He was careless in the yard.
I don't remember the exact total now, but there was probably 7 suicides while I was there. And there may have been more, but 7 that I can recall. And most of them was done by hanging themselves. A few slit their wrists and didn't make it. Usually, slicing your wrists, someone discovers you before you bleed completely out. There's lots of attempts of suicide, and these were the wrist cutters. But the ones that hung themselves, that was it. Another fellow who was surprised to everyone that he hung himself was a muscle freak. He was a guerrilla. When he was led and he was kept in 2 house. It wasn't solitary confinement or anything like that. It was just different cell. It was kind of a solitary for him. He was not a troublemaker. They just didn't want any trouble because he wasn't scared of man or beast. Somebody say something wrong to him, he'd knock their head clean off, literally. He was such a muscular guy. He could do Chinese push-ups with one arm. He didn't even have to use 2. He just put his back up against the wall and just do as many push-ups. You'd ask him to do 500, didn't mean nothing to him. But one morning, totally surprised everyone. He got tired of doing his push-ups and his calisthenics or something. And he hung himself, and he hung himself by suffocating. His neck was so stout you couldn't have broke it with a club. He was hanging from the top of his cell block. But there was many other ways. Just as I become trustee, we had a fellow who had some acid spilt in his eyes. So he used this and pretended to be blind. And he went around with the cane, and one day I was sitting in the back bench at the theater, and he just come to the theater to be with his friends, so everybody thought, because he didn't really pay any attention to the film, but I noticed he come running in there and didn't use his cane and sat down. Didn't look around for the bench or nothing, he just knew it was there and sat down on it. And I thought, that guy's no more blind than nothing. And sure enough, even after I was released and paroled, I read in the paper where this fellow was caught staring at the nurses and sent back to the penitentiary, having perfect 20/20 vision when beautiful legs walked by and got caught at it. So he picked him out for about 8 months of being blind, and he was not blind. He could see very well.
I remember first time I had an inmate cut my hair, Don Broncho. It was in 3 house on the first floor on the south tier, all the way back, corner cell, last cell down. Went down there and told Don, I said, I understand you cut hair. He says, yeah. He said, I cut hair. I said, would you mind cutting my hair? He said, no, climb up in the chair, I'll cut your hair. He cut my hair, and after he got done, he says, let me go and clean you up a little bit. He said, you know what this is? I said, yeah, it's a razor blade. He said, I got you at my mercy, don't you? I said, you sure do, Don. He said, well, don't think nothing of it right now. And that was it.
I did see a knife and knife defender fight. We have quite the weapons in there. I won't take time to describe some of them now, but they have what they call a de-knifer, and the other fellow had a knife, and I noticed in knife fights after it was all over, the place that they try to get the other fellow is not a shoulders or a heart shot or something like that. It's either the stomach or the eyes. If you can slice the other guy's eyes, he can't see you, and you've got him. Or if you slice his guts open and they fall out, you've got him. And a knife fight isn't too scary until it's over. Then I get butterflies, and we've seen one of these, and the fellow with the de-knifer yanked the knife away from the other fellow so quick that it was a short-lived knife fight, but they were out to do one another bodily harm very seriously. And the fellow was going to literally cut the other guy's stomach wide open with his de-knifer, and he ducked, whirled, and took off with the deadline just as fast as he could run with the other guy right behind him, and he ran out on the deadline with his hands up. The other fellow did not step out on the deadline, which was a good thing, because by the time he got there, the guards were ready, and they would have been someone seriously wounded at least. But that was quite scary afterward. It was kind of amusing while it took place, but very scary afterward. There was lots of knife fightings and knifings, which I did not get in on or know about. Most of the fights I knew was gentleman fights, fist to fist, and it was just over little things normally. Sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, maybe it was money matters, lending and borrowing.
It's talked about honor among thieves.
There's no
that is
convict
a big
code
farce.
anymore.
That's a big farce.
Convict code is probably maybe held by 1% of total population.
What's the convict code?
The convict code is like Tony was talking about.
Your own number.
Exactly. You do your own number. You do your own time. If you hear something, you keep it within yourself. If you see something, you're blind to it. I don't care if it's a killing, whatever. You just don't see it. I mean, number one, you're in there to do your number. And when you mess with somebody else or get in somebody else's faces, then you're going to have problems. Then you're looking for trouble. But if you just do your own time, you do your job, and you maintain your own personality and your own status, you're not going to have problems.
You were allowed a Bible, so you could read that much. In the morning, they'd come in, wake you up, get you up, take all your stuff away from you, and bring down the cart, and they'd go ahead and feed you. And then the rest of the day was just sitting there either talking to the guys in the next cell or the cell below you or hollering at one another, or you just spent it sitting there thinking about why you was there, reading the Bible or doing whatever, because there just wasn't nothing to do. Telling stories about things out on the streets or asking somebody if they knew so-and-so from someplace, and eventually you'd find somebody who knew who you was talking about, and then you'd carry on a conversation for about 29 of those 30 days just to get along. Then they'd feed you dinner, and once a week they'd come in and let you take a shower. And all the showers were against the wall. You went out there, didn't make any difference. You went out there in front of everybody, whatever, and you took your shower. And you had a towel, and you went ahead and changed your coveralls. You changed your towel, and that was it. You went back in, and that was your excitement for the week.
Was the only form of communication you had was with the other inmates by talking between the cells?
Right.
No mail?
No mail, no nothing. If you was lucky, and you happened to know the officer and made changes, you might get him to move you to the second tier. And from the second tier, you could see out. And then you could see the guys walking in front of Five House. In front of Five House for maximum security at that time, there used to be about 5 furrows where guys would walk side by side. They walked along there so many times and so often that there was little trenches, and you could sit out there and watch the guys. And then, of course, we'd spend part of our day tearing pieces out of our blankets, strings out of our blankets, and finding anything like a pencil if we could find one, or a loose bolt or a nut or anything we could find. And then we'd have these windows open that would go outside, and we'd go ahead and throw strings out there and hope that they'd go down the ground, and somebody would tie on maybe a cigarette, a striker, and a match, and you could haul it back in, and everybody on that tier would smoke it. You could get somebody to put it on there for you.
Were you very successful with that?
Well, quite successful. But we had a lot of time to work at it.
What types of things did you personally get back?
Oh, pencils that we could write, matches, cigarettes, like I said, rolling papers, tobacco. Sometimes it was smuggled into the food. Sometimes they didn't catch it. Sometimes in a tray or something. We had our ways of getting some things, but like you do, you become, I imagine, what you would consider a little ingenious.
I went down that night and I said, Ray, do you think you committed too terrible a crime for God to forgive? And for the first time he looked me in the eye, he said yes. I read him a scripture that said God will forgive anything. I said, do you think about that tonight? And I went out and prayed with him the next morning. And he was sentenced to die 30 days later. He was the most peaceful man in the execution chamber. Some of the guards had been drinking to get the courage up. The warden was naturally white-faced because he had to give the order. And they made a kind of a cradle to strap him into because we were hanging there. And if he fainted, he would choke to death. It would be a horrible thing. Where execution by hanging is actually the most merciful because the minute that cord is broken in the back of your neck, there's no feeling whatsoever. For all intents and purposes, your heart may beat for 10 or 15 minutes, but you're dead. And I know that Ray was on his knees praying when he came in. He looked up and said, what's that for, chaplain? I don't know. just kind of smiled and said, I'm not going to faint. He said, I made my peace with God, I'm not going to faint. He didn't.
Did he feel he deserved his fate?
Oh, yes. Yeah, he felt that he deserved to die. At about 10 minutes till 12, we strapped him down on this board, and we packed him in from his cell in on the gallows, and then that's when the warden asked him his last wish, if he wanted to say anything, and he said, yes, he said, I do, but I don't know how to say it. And then we waited a few minutes and then nodded to the warden, or to the hangman, and he put the rope on him and sprung the trap, and that was it.
The women's ward, which is just outside of the old prison, it was made for the women not to get out of, but it was quite common that the men would get in. And one fellow, I can't remember his name right at this time, he was very handy at getting in there. He was a trustee, and he would go in and help the ladies out once in a while. But even that got kind of caught on too, because they had a tree in the corner of the ladies' prison, and that's the way he wasn't having to go up the outside wall and then just jump over into the tree and back and down into the women's ward. But the tree is no longer in there, and that women's ward was moved, in fact, and it's at Old Idaho now, I guess.